Welcome back. Let's talk water now. Water tankers have been dispatched in some parts of the country. Now, Water and Sanitation Minister Lindiwe Sisulu recently promised 41,000 tankers to communities in desperate need of water to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. So, several high-risk areas that have little or no access to water have been identified for immediate intervention. So, to discuss this further, we are joined by the department spokesperson, Sputnik Ratau. Thanks so much for your time and welcome to Morning Live once again.
Thank you so much for having us on Morning Live, and good morning to the viewers.
Mr. Ratau, if we could just go back a little bit on your most recent visit to our studios here at SABC. We spoke to you about water shortages in Qwaqwa, where you also at that point identified and promised to provide thousands of water tankers to alleviate the situation there. But not so long after that, the department seemingly fell short of keeping those promises. So how many tankers have now been dispatched to that particular area, and have you managed to successfully arrest the water shortage situation in Qwaqwa?
Sakina, the water shortage situation has not been fully arrested yet in Qwaqwa, but that project is ongoing. Sidibeng Water is hard at it and continuing with the delivery. Remember that married to the delivery of the water tanks and the water tankers is the fact of refurbishing the infrastructure. So there is a pipeline between Harang and Comet that is really beginning to look much better. We are looking at other projects as well between the university and one of the water treatment plants that also needed to be refurbished. So it's an ongoing project that is not yet at the very tail end. But we believe that Sidibeng Water has delivered in the larger part of Qwaqwa, and we are continuing to do that.
So, in addition to those promises, we have Minister Sisulu mentioning that an additional 41,000 water tanks would be brought on to aid communities during this time. So please tell us a little bit more about this particular project and how is it going in terms of the rollout?
Sakina, following on the President's pronouncements of the nation's state of disaster, the Department of Water and Sanitation, through the Minister Sisulu, as you correctly put it, had to really get out of the starting blocks and do things much more differently and much more quickly. And that implies that we needed to look at how we then short-circuit the procurement system so that within the regulations of the PFMA, but also as National Treasury had provided for that national disaster procurement processes to be eased, but not to flout the PFMA, then we are able to see that at the moment we're working together with the private sector, those companies that are producing these water tanks and water tankers that have come to the party to say how much of these they have got in stock and how many they can still be able to produce. We have really pushed up those tankers' availability in different communities. We are not yet at the state of Uhuru, but what we are doing now is that we have seen tankers being delivered in the Eastern Cape, primarily in some parts of Gauteng. We know that even yesterday, the provincial head of Gauteng was in Hammanskraal delivering some of the tankers. The day before, there were tankers that were going into parts of Soweto and so on. So we are looking at primarily those provinces that have got the most densely populated informal settlements, Gauteng, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, as well as KwaZulu-Natal, in terms of the informal settlements that are densely populated. But we're also looking at the rural areas where we are working together with the traditional leadership as well as COCTA to be able to identify those areas. By the way, as Minister had said, that over 2,000 areas have actually been identified that needed this very urgent and necessary intervention.
So, Mr. Ratau, 41,000 water tankers, more than 2,000 areas in dire need. How many have you actually dispatched at this point?
At this point, we've dispatched, if I look at the report that we had yesterday, over 1,500 have already been dispatched to certain areas. But remember that we're also piggybacking on the work that was already in place in terms of the intervention so far as the drought was concerned. So we are not starting from day zero, but we are starting from a point of saying, merit to that intervention of the drought, how many more are we able to dispatch on a daily basis? And we are updating that information as we go.
So what is the actual dispatching plan? Are there any guidelines, any timeframes? For example, how many per area and how often will those tankers be filled?
What we are doing is we have identified those areas according to the work that has been done by the Department of Human Settlements and ourselves, together with COCTA, identifying those areas as per the information that was already on hand due to the intelligence that we've gathered over the years. That's the one part. We're talking primarily of those areas that we regard as hotspots, for the lack of a better word. And based on that, we then also are looking at those areas that are, like I'm saying, densely populated and so forth. So the numbers would not necessarily be the same throughout. They would be guided by the requirements per area, so that we are not necessarily dispatching only about 10 across each province or maybe 100 across each province, but each province where the supply will be determined by the need and requirement.
Now, quite apart from water being a basic need and an inalienable right, we also keep hearing the messaging about trying to curb the spread of COVID-19 by using, the means of washing our hands regularly as one of those measures. So where communities don't have water tanks as yet, what else is the department doing to try and assist those communities in order for them to follow the COVID-19 guidelines?
What we are saying, we are marrying our intervention with the awareness and education that has been ongoing anyway. So what we are saying is that where people are still...
All right, our apologies there. We seem to have lost that connection to Mr. Sputnik Ratau, who is, of course, the Water and Sanitation Department spokesperson. We are into news time, but we do have that connection back with Mr. Ratau just to wrap up this interview. Mr. Ratau, unfortunately, we lost you there as you were giving a response as to what other measures, contingency plans, does the department have in place for those areas that are seeing a scarcity of water right now?
Yes, what we continue to say is that where people are drawing water from natural resources, we continue to encourage them to take the simple measures of purifying that water, either by boiling or by use of detergents. We know that where there is no water, then we really have to jack up ourselves so that we can be able to deliver as quickly as possible, whether through tanks or standpipes, or even alternatives where we have to tank our water in.
Well, Mr. Ratau, we're going to leave it there. Sputnik Ratau, National Spokesperson for the Department of Water and Sanitation, talking to us about, among other things, the 41,000 water tankers that the department has promised to provide to communities that still don't have access to water, and this as the coronavirus outbreak begins to impact South Africa. And unfortunately, some areas still haven't seen those promises met.